It's okay. My name is William Walker. I'm the chair of the I'm William Walker. I'm the chair of the Interagency Equity Advisory Committee that advises Caltrans, CalSTA, and the California Transportation Commission. Today is December 4th. We are in a hybrid session for our business meeting for the EAC. We will also have an executive meeting jointly held with our commission later this afternoon, and of course the CTC will be meeting the 2 following days, and our strategic plan meeting will also be tomorrow. Again, I'm William. I'm joined by my fellow members, and what I'll do right now is hand it over to Clerk Justin Hall, who will call roll for both members present and on our video stream, and will also give us instructions for today. Good morning, Clerk Hall.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. Pardon me. I will now call the roll. Chair William Walker.
Present.
Vice Chair Martha Armas Kelly. Alexandria Contreras. Ana Gonzalez.
Presente.
Herb Hastings. Herb, I believe you're still on mute.
I'm present, and I apologize for all the absences over the last couple meetings.
Thank you, Herb. Gloria Huerta.
Present.
Peggy Martinez. Amber Novi.
Present.
Andres Ramirez. Michelle Rousey.
Present.
Connie Stewart. I believe Connie's on her way. Randy Torres Van Vleck.
I'm here. Thank you.
Cheryl Villegas Walker.
Present.
Christine Williams. Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you very much. Clerk Hall, would you like to continue by giving us the rules of the road, as they say?
Will do. Thank you. Welcome to the December 4th, 2024 Interagency Transportation Equity Advisory Committee business meeting. This committee's focus will be on elevating diverse and historically marginalized voices and will advise the California Transportation Commission, California State Transportation Agency, and California Department of Transportation on how to achieve meaningful outcomes in transportation equity, environmental justice, and equitable economic opportunities, especially as related to transportation planning and programming. The meeting agenda is located on the Commission's website at www.catc.ca.gov. Any document created for this committee can be translated into any language you need. Simply email us at transportationeac@dot.ca.gov, and we will have them returned to you as quickly as possible. American Sign Language translation is being provided for this meeting. You should see them on your screen. Live closed captioning is also available. Please select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of your screen. There are a number of language options available there to choose from. Presenters, if you're on the agenda to make a presentation, please do your best to be succinct. Please remember to speak at a steady pace to allow our translating services adequate time for accurate translations. If you are presenting remotely, we hope that you will turn on your camera during your presentation, if you have one. Members of the public, we welcome comments from the public as a part of each item at this meeting. For those attending in person, please submit a speaker slip to the clerk, that's me, here in the front of the room to let us know you want to comment on an item. For those attending via Zoom, you should see the webinar control panel likely located on the bottom of your screen. There you'll find the raise hand and Q&A tabs. We encourage you to use the raise hand feature as soon as we reach the item to give the system time to acknowledge you. Committee staff will let you know when it's your turn to make your comment. Alternately, You may use the Q&A tab to submit your comment. Committee staff will read the comment on your behalf. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and phone number to access the webinar. These should not be shared with other participants, as this can create confusion for staff when making comments. Please do your best to be concise. Please remember to speak at a steady pace to allow our translating services adequate time for accurate translations. Please make sure that your comments add new information. If you agree with the comments of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. We ask that you make your point in 2 minutes or less. If for some reason we have many speakers on any single topic, we reserve the right to limit those comments to 1 minute if needed. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Clerk Hall, and also just a thank you to Clerk Hall, Deputy Director Doug Remedios, and Brandy. Brandy, you're gonna have to tell me, or tell whomever sits here, the proper title for you, other than super person. The three of them are really the reason why we have our stream, why we are sitting at these microphones. I think Rob is the person here in the building, so just a big shout out to everyone that's helping to stream us out to the world today. I'm William Walker. I'm African-American, so I have darker toned skin. I'm wearing a gold tie and a dark suit, and I have shoulder-length dreadlocks. We tend to give these descriptions of ourselves prior to us speaking for folks who don't have the privilege to be able to see us visually. So if you'd like to do that yourselves throughout the meeting, feel free to do so, and I'll try to remind folks. We're going to move from item 1 to item number 2, which is an action item, adoption of the October 2024 meeting minutes. And I'll entertain a motion in a second at this time. If anyone would like to move.
Chair Walker, I'd move approval as presented. This is Villegas Walker.
All right, Cousin Walker, Member Villegas Walker is moving the approval of minutes. Is there a second?
I second it, Amber Novi.
All right, thank you, Member Novi. And if there's no discussion or amendments to the minutes and no public comment on that item, we will go to a roll call vote with Clerk Hall.
Chair, not seeing any public requests for public comment on this item.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair William Walker.
Oh, aye.
Vice Chair Armis Kelly.
Aye.
Alexandria Contreras. Ana Gonzalez.
Aye.
Herb Hastings.
Abstained.
Gloria Huerta.
Aye.
Peggy Martinez. Amber Novi.
Aye.
Andres Ramirez. Michelle Rousey.
Aye.
Connie Stewart. Randy Torres Van Vleck.
Aye.
Cheryl Villegas Walker.
Yes.
Christine Williams. Chair, the item is approved.
Thank you very much. I also neglected to mention that there isn't a regular public comment item for today's meeting, but since there were no requests to speak, I'll try to remind folks at the very end of the meeting, which is the end of item or tab 5, that we'll open it up again for public comment at that time. Forgive me for not welcoming you all to the Inland Valley or Inland Empire, depending on what you like to say, region. We are here in Riverside, California, and very happy to be welcomed by folks in this region. So again, thank you. Item 3, we will be discussing our Senate Bill 1121 comments and recommendations. Senate Bill 1121 refers to the State and Local Transportation Needs Assessment Report, and Staff have led a number of different meetings that began in February virtually. There was both a workshop north and south in the Los Angeles area and in the Bay Area, if I'm not mistaken. Francis will correct me if I'm wrong on that. So Francis will be providing an update and summary of comments and feedback received by EAC members and the public on the needs assessment. I want to briefly say, I think that at the last committee meeting, we hadn't received a fully remediated document, so the recommendations weren't fully presented. Is that correct? That's what I recall.
I believe we did send out a fully remediated.
No, we received it, but I'm
Oh.
saying at the public meeting that we met,
Oh, yes.
that document wasn't fully.
In November 18th.
Right. So
Yes.
I'm going to just be fully transparent with me personally. I'll be presenting a letter to the commission tomorrow and to this body because I didn't have a chance to read the fully remediated document after that November 18th meeting. I was hoping that we would be able to do it there and to have a fuller discussion, but I just want to share that it's really critical for us to have that touch point prior to our meeting so that we can fully engage in the report process. So that's just my personal feedback, but I will hand it over to Francis if you'd like to. We're also describing ourselves for folks who need that description. So welcome, Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Chair Walker. Good morning, everyone. My name is Francis Diaz-Sanchez, and I am the Program Manager for the Needs Assessment here at the California Transportation Commission. I am female. My pronouns are she, her. I am Chinese American with shoulder-length black hair that's graying these days, wearing a mustard yellow cardigan and blue blouse underneath. Okay. Next slide, please. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, I think at one of the EAC member meetings in August, we went over what the transportation needs assessment is exactly. So, just as a review, the needs assessment is a high-level statewide look at transportation funding over the course of 10 years, so out to the year 2035. It is an estimate of the costs to operate, maintain, and grow the statewide multimodal transportation system over that 10-year period. It is a simple calculation of the estimated gap that exists between our expected transportation revenues and our ever-growing needs. The report will provide potential policy recommendations to address this gap, i.e. the sustainable revenue sources. And it is intended to be a big picture document to help identify the problem and provide, again, some policy options for our lawmakers, so the state legislature. What the needs assessment isn't is an in-depth representation of all transportation needs. It is not a detailed prioritized project list or an implementation plan. Representation of the state's modal priorities, and it is not a guarantee of a policy implementation or solution in and of itself. I just want to note that all the implementation level information received over the course of the meetings we've had with the EAC members will be referred to the appropriate implementation agencies or entities. Next slide, please. This is just a broad overview of all the stakeholder work group meetings that we've had and EAC meetings and member briefings. So, EAC members had attended stakeholder work group meetings and policy recommendation workshops. We had some member briefings in November in 2023 last year prior to the release of the interim report. Commission staff briefed the entire EAC body on August 22nd, 2024. Next slide, please. Commission staff also presented at the October 7th Interagency Equity Advisory Committee Walkability, Disability, and Complete Streets Subcommittee meeting, and where we received initial feedback from subcommittee members on accessibility, ADA, and transit needs and challenges. Commission staff also briefed the EAC subcommittee members on the draft needs assessment in more detail on October 16th, October 21st, November 1st, November 8th, and November 13th. We came back to the Walkability, Disability, Complete Streets Subcommittee meeting on November 18th to discuss the feedback we heard at that point. Next slide, please. So those were all the meetings that we held with all the committee members up until that point, gathering feedback for the draft needs assessment. And from what we heard from members in terms of transportation needs, broadly speaking, transportation funding has not been as robust or as adequate to address all the state's needs, especially regarding transit and accessibility. In terms of accessibility itself, we heard a lot of concern around a reduction in the transit budget. And that's very concerning because that means that service cuts to transit lines would also, well, that's just an impact itself, but it also has implications for paratransit services when transit lines are cut or reduced. Paratransit must be scheduled at least a day in advance, so there's not a lot of flexibility. There's not a lot of nimbleness in sort of those services. There are concerns over the reliability of paratransit service cuts due to driver availability. So even if you have something scheduled, sometimes those appointments get cut. On-demand paratransit services can fill some of those gaps, but that still has its own challenges, such as the accommodation of wheelchair users. So again, not quite as nimble and flexible from what we heard. And I think, highlighting that services must meet what the people need. So, broad themes over on the accessibility front there. Next slide, please. What we heard in terms of the policy recommendation workshop summary on road charge, and also from member briefings. Many riders that utilize paratransit services also utilize fixed route transit service. So it's not an either or, it's not binary. So we need to consider rethinking how to plan or deploy funding in a more innovative way. The recommendation section presumes that there is support on adopting road charge from equity-based organizations or communities, but that may not be true entirely. So we heard that several times. Consider using the terminology vehicle miles traveled over road charge. So some that are familiar with what road charge is understands how contentious the term is and to explore other options around that particular potential solution. Concern expressed over the financial impact to low-income drivers with road charge. So these are broadly, again, what we heard over the concerns on some of the policy recommendations that members did review. Next slide, please. So in terms of the feedback that we heard and what we incorporated into the draft needs assessment that will be released in January for public comment, specifically on Chapter 8 in the accessibility and mobility section, we received comment on including education and employment alongside accessing medical and social services is a critical sort of accessibility center, like what people need to access. Limitations with paratransit for users with accessibility needs. So really highlighting that, yes, here's a base level sort of accommodation, but more needs to be done. Transit and infrastructure cuts impact seniors and persons with disabilities, as well as low income and other populations that are dependent on transit or utilize transit as their main transportation mode. Trip planning is challenging for those with disabilities, highlighting that, again, it requires at least a day of advance notice, if not more. And users with accessibility needs may not be able to use transportation network companies like Lyft or Uber. Again, just highlighting some of those limitations, because I know that while there are some on-demand services that are deployed, there's still some of these challenges out there for our users. In terms of the additional feedback that was not incorporated into the draft needs assessment, Commission staff will be providing this feedback to the implementing agencies or entities, such as the California Transit Association. We're going to highlight that adapting the needs of paratransit service riders is critical, meeting what the people need. So we'll coordinate, a meeting time with the California Transit Association with members to speak about these challenges here. The reduced transit budget, like what that means, how does this impact our users, especially on the accessibility front, particularly around paratransit. The need for more accessibility transportation information and data to be included in the regional transportation plans. This is really important because the needs assessment really looked at pre-existing information such as the regional transportation plans. And so there's a lot of concern about that information making it into the fiscally constrained plans that the RTPAs and MPOs develop in their regional transportation plans. In terms of the administration and California legislature, should road charge be selected as the preferred option, outreach and engagement is really critical. Currently, we do have a pilot deployed on the road charge revenue collection pilot, and there has been some outreach and engagement done on their pilots, but if the legislature were to move forward, we know that a really large education, outreach, and engagement campaign will be needed on that front. So particularly with equity-based organizations. So that's something that we will highlight to the legislature. Mindful of the terminology used when the state legislature moves forward with a selected sustainable funding source to potentially replace the fuel tax. Again, I think this is something that really has to be worked on, really cognizant, really listening to our stakeholders, to the people in California, those that have a lot of concerns around whatever may potentially replace the gas tax or whatever solutions come forward in the future. Next slide, please. No, one more slide. I know, the internet's it's waking up with me today. This is just broadly our next steps. In January, we intend to release the draft 2025 needs assessment for public comment. It will be presented at the January commission meeting. And so we will take any additional public comments at that time. In March, we intend to present the final needs assessment at the commission meeting, March 20th through 21st. And then we will submit the final needs assessment to the California legislature upon adoption. And as a reminder, we do intend to update this report every 5 years as outlined in Senate Bill 1121. So, there is still opportunity to provide more information at that point. And we will be working, to try to close some of those gaps, that we did identify in this needs assessment as well. So with that, next slide. Here's my contact information and my supervisor, Laura Pennebaker's contact information, should you have any additional questions from today's presentation. And so I will now leave it for questions.
Well, Let the record reflect that Member Stewart has joined us, and welcome. And it's early for all of us, mind you. We normally start on an afternoon on a day like this. So when you see us straggling in, it's because planes come in at different times. And want to also welcome Commissioner and past President Leanne Eager, and I know that Vice Chair Darnell Grisby is also here. We have about 10 minutes left for this item, so just keep that in mind when you make your comments. If you speak for more than 2 minutes, it means we will probably only get to 2 people. So I'll start with Member or Vice Chair Armis Kelly.
Good morning. I am a female Indigenous woman, and I am wearing a beige and black houndstooth sweater. I have brown eyes, burgundy hair, and red lippy. So just want to let everyone know. And I am very honored to be on Tongan territory today, and I represent the Yokut and the Miwok territories in the Central Valley. My question to you is, have we had any considerations or even thoughts in regards to possible incentives available for those Lyft and Uber drivers if they modify their vehicles so that we can increase the mobility for those in paratransit needs? Is that a possibility? Is that something that's been even brought up before? Because I know that in, for example, CARB, if we want to, have some modifications done to industry, there are incentives available for those that are willing to take that initiative. And I'm thinking that in the process of driving, to increase and foment the amount of people that would be able to use that Lyft and Uber, of course, those modifications cost money. And if there were someone that would be interested with an incentive, they may be more apt to service those type of needs.
We have not received that sort of comment on that, and I think this was, the challenges with on-demand services really came up through the subcommittee meeting discussions. So it's a question I think we can ask the California Transit Association of what's possible on that front when I think funding is, deployed to other agencies or organizations that sometimes help coordinate those services. But I noted that as a question and something we can explore and see with, I think, the transit agencies, and I'll reach out to some of our counterparts at Caltrans that oversee the federal, the FTA funding for those services.
Thank you so much. Your report was great. Thank you.
I'll just quickly add, coming from an Uber driver standpoint, that it's also the time that's associated with assisting a passenger that might have mobility issues, because it's not that those rides are paid more, because they're generally not. I will hand it to Member Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair Walker. Ana Gonzalez, she, her, ella. I am a Latina, black, short hair, green eyes, 5'5", wearing a brownish blazer, white shirt, glasses. And so my comment is about the road charge. When we take into consideration bringing that up for an option, I want to encourage us to bring up some policies about, making corporations responsible for their wear and tear for their operations that cause the road degradation to our roads, specifically here in the Inland Empire, where we see more than 60,000 truck trips a day and more growing, right? And, we always put it back on the taxpayers or the folks that, since this is a bedroom community and most of our community members have to drive far away to get good wage jobs outside of our communities, it's a higher percentage of the trucks that cause that road degradation, and yet our community members are to pay the bill for the roads. And so we want to encourage that we think about these policies to ensure that these corporations are paying their fair share and not the taxpayers that are already paying their registration for their cars, their tax, the gas tax, and paying for their smog checks and all of these burdens that they're already paying for, yet the corporations are getting away with not paying anything or their fair share, right? So I want to bring that up, and also want to request that as we're creating this assessment study, that we create a cost analysis study implemented in here where we really take a really good look at what are the costs to our California residents of how much they really pay for their car registration and how much of those funds really go into road repairs and road infrastructure upgrades and SB1 funds, and like put all that together in a nice graphic so we can really see where all those funds are going and what communities are actually taking advantage of those funds and upgrading their infrastructure. And so like putting all that together, because I don't think I've seen a study like that. And so I want to make sure that before we take that road charge into consideration, we're already looking at all of those funds that are coming in and where they're going. And so those are my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you so much. Member Gonzalez, did you want to respond, Francis? Or
I
Ms.
just-
Dea Sanchez, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay, don't worry, yeah. Community member Ann Gonzalez, yes, so there have been studies done or exploring having a different rate structure for medium and heavy duty vehicles, recognizing that their weights impact our roads differently. So that's something, within the recommendation structure, kind of noting that, light duty passenger vehicles and medium and heavy duty vehicles, in terms of rate, the legislature should consider, different rates at the time. A lot of our studies have focused predominantly on light-duty vehicles, but there are a lot of pilots too going on to see how it would work on the medium and heavy-duty vehicle side.
Yeah, because I will tell you that the Inland Empire, out of the entire state of California, is the only region impacted by this factor. And so I would look really closely into our region and really look at what's happening in our roads, more so than the rest of the rest of the state, because it is our region that's being highly impacted by the road degradation from heavy duty trucks, more so than the rest of the state. And it's coming to the Central Valley, it's coming to the high desert, it's coming to the East Coachella Valley, but it's happening right here. So if we want to prevent that from happening to the rest of the state, we have to take a close look at what's happening here already. And we're facing catastrophic, infrastructure failure now. And so we want to make sure that we're taking a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach before something bad happens.
Not seeing any other hands, I want to quickly just point out that I think that I'm calling on myself is why I said not seeing any other hands. The VMT language and the road charge language, I don't think it's something that's going to resonate with Californians. What we're really talking about is an access charge or an access option. And when I think of accessing our road system, I think of folks who pay $200 to $400 a month to register their car on an annual basis. I think of bus and transit riders that pay upwards of $100 a month to do the same. So transit riders are already paying 3 times to access this same road network that folks who have a car access. But car owners get places a lot faster than folks who ride transit, and transit riders are actually working toward our goal of reducing vehicle trips and reducing emissions and reducing the wear and tear on our road network. And so I'm going to stop there because like I said, I will prepare a letter for January's meeting, and I'll prepare something for this item to share with you before the end of this week. But we have to be able to reflect this in a way that we can sell this to Californians so that they are on board. And as it stands right now, the nomenclature we're using, I don't believe folks are on board. Why don't I quickly go to public comment? I think we have 3 speakers. We have 2 in the room and 1 online. So I'll start with folks in the room.
Chair,
Oh,
Member Rousey raised her hand.
oh, Member Rousey. And that's what I was going to say. Members, please raise your hand prior to this item ending. Member Rousey.
Yeah, hi. And I really like what you have added into the comments from members from the subcommittee and also from other members. I am concerned about this assessment not being and having so many gaps in it around
Member
accessibility.
Rousey, I don't mean to interrupt. We're having some interference on your line, and I think we made out that you appreciate the comments that were added after your committee meeting, because you're the chair of that committee. If you could, if it's a mic positioning thing, if you could start again and share your next comment, please.
All right, can you hear me now? Is that better?
It's a little bit better, but go ahead. There's still some interference, but why don't you go ahead, please?
Okay. I really like the comments that were added from the subcommittee members and the other members in around accessibility and the needs assessment. I'm hoping that I'm concerned about it not being another 5 years before this assessment is done again, and the gap that is currently in it. And so I just have concerns going forward with some of the gaps in not only accessibility, but other things, and that there isn't a complete assessment of what needs to be going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members that wanted to speak?
Not seeing any other hands raised at this moment.
Great, I'll go to public comment, and I'd like you to respond to Ms. Rousey once I go through public comment so that we can wrap up the item, Ms. De Sanchez. So first we'll have Mike McCarthy from Sierra Club and Riverside Neighbors Opposing Warehouses Are Now, followed by Jen Larrett Smith, also with Riverside Neighbors Opposing Warehouses Are Now. Sir McCarthy.
Oh.
Got to share the mic. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, committee members. Mike McCarthy, Are Now. I'm tall, white, have glasses, and a Sea Slug t-shirt. I'm here on behalf of Are Now and the Sierra Club. I'm also a researcher at Pitzer College, an adjunct professor there, and I've built the Warehouse City Dashboard, which quantifies warehouses in Southern California. The Inland Empire is disproportionately impacted by warehouses and by freight movement, and the Transportation Corridor Enhancement Program disproportionately gets targeted to our communities, and that is not paired with active transportation projects. That is not paired with things, and that has a tension in terms of the funding that comes to our region. I would like to ask that this SB 1121, 1211, whatever, prioritizes mode shift, moving freight from trucks to rail. Stop prioritizing road widenings and start prioritizing moving the goods via rail. We've had a shift from rail away from that. Even though we put a lot of money into rail for freight movement, it's actually going down over time from the ports of LA and Long Beach. So I'd ask that every TSEP project include an active transportation project to offset the impacts to communities so that we get some of that infrastructure funding we need for our communities and not just for the goods movement of our corporations, because that is what is coming to our neighborhoods right now. And since 65% of new warehouse square footage is coming to the Inland Empire, 2 counties, we get 2/3 of the state's warehouses, and that's from CEQA. That's the last 5 years. Okay, we get most of the warehouses. It's disproportionately impacting our communities. So secondly, I just heard some things in there about growth. We need to stop using the word growth. Our population is declining. Our transportation needs are supposed to decline with VMT, right? We have goals to have sustainable. We need to use different language from an equity advisory committee and say we need to have the right size vision as opposed to growth, especially with regards to freight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Jen Larrett Smith, thank you. Super happy to have public members in person here at the EAC. Welcome.
I'm a Chinese American woman with black hair. I'm a resident of Riverside and the founder of Riverside Neighbors Opposing Warehouses. And I'm a community activist in the Inland Empire, like Anna. And I have to tell you, sometimes it feels as though our local governments work for the logistics industry rather than for residents, because we have the worst air quality in the nation. We're in a housing crisis, and every year the effects of climate change make themselves known with record heat and wildfires, and our vulnerable communities bear a particularly heavy pollution burden. But instead of protecting residents and prioritizing our needs and policies, all too often our local governments bend over backwards for multinational corporations looking for cheap land and cheap labor. And in the Inland Empire, developers have raised homes to build warehouse after warehouse, and our region continues to roll out the welcome mat for them and their diesel fuels and trucks. And I believe we're better than the nation's junk drawer, but I'm begging governing bodies like the CTC to believe that too. The CTC's 10-year plan.
Miss Larrett Smith, if you could slow down for our.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have sign interpreters, and I should have said that earlier.
Yes, I had 2 minutes, so.
Great.
The CTC's 10-year plan allocates very little funding to sustainability goals, which would actually benefit the health and safety of people who live here. Instead, it prioritizes road expansions that encourages even more warehouses to be built. And once again, it feels as though freight-related goods movement is the priority rather than the people who live here. Please align your goals and your funding with projects that meet the requirement for the California Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, properly fund programs like the Active Transportation Program, and divert money away from road expansion projects that invite multi-billionaires to continue to exploit our land and pollute our air. We can be more in the Inland Empire than the nation's junk drawer, but we have to believe it and we have to plan for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Diaz-Sanchez, is there anything you'd like to add in your final portion of your presentation? Oh,
Chair, we do have one online commenter.
oh, well, that's right. I'm sorry. A third online commenter. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Marvin Norman, we see your hand raised.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Yes, Marvin Norman, San Bernardino resident, and I've also scored ATP applications for CTC for several cycles now. And so when Mike and others are talking about the dire need for funding for active transportation, it is real. And as I've scored, even this year, I scored projects that scored high 90s. They didn't get funded because of the shortage of funding. And I know some of it's the legislator. We need to bother them to put more money toward the program. And they changed the program this cycle with their budget shenanigans, but also, I mean, CTC and Caltrans have options to move money around as well. I also share some of the same concerns about TSEP funding. Recently we were involved with last year with about the same time, the CTC actually voted to not fund the TSEP project because with questionable arguments here in the inland region, the I-15 expansion project from SBCTA. And so, that was a moment of clarity. And of course, it eventually got voted in after all. But, we need to keep getting critical. And it was keep putting a critical eye towards making sure our funding is actually matching the arguments and the goals we are set in CAPTI in this legislation. And I also, to the chair's point about how we sell the road charge, I agree that road charge is going to go over like a lead balloon. It definitely needs something more. And I know for like the toll lanes that recently have opened on I-10, what one I've come up with is, choice, because everything, there's no free, we haven't traditionally charged people. There haven't been a lot of toll roads in most places, but realistically, everything has a price. And the question is, are you paying with your time or your money? And so we're giving people the choice now. And so that's perhaps one way to approach the topic. And additionally, we really need to address the inequitable distribution of funding. I know last year in 2022, San Bernardino County.
Your time has expired.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. And you're welcome to, if you want, email the remainder of your comments to our email address, is it it's transportation EAC at catc.ca.gov. Ms. Dia-Sanchez.
I just wanted to inform you that it's at dot.ca.gov.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Transportation EAC at dot.ca.gov. My apologies. Ms. Dia-Sanchez.
Hi, I think earlier you had requested that I kind of respond to Committee Member Rousey's comments around accessibility and other gaps in the report. I'm going to follow up with Committee Member Rousey to talk a little more about her comments, but also share that again with CTA members and see how we can cross our information with the Senate Bill 125 effort on the Transit Transformation Task Force, and how maybe some of the information here can be reflected in their report recommendations as well. So
Great. And I'd also just, so I'm not sure what this body will be, composed as in the next meeting, and I don't know how we can make requests because we can't necessarily follow up on them. But what I would encourage is the EAC, yes, we are representative of different community stakeholders and different groups, but it would be nice because I know that the SB 125 group is pretty industry heavy, like with a lot of folks who work within transportation, whether it's through CTA or whether it's through the different agencies. We need more buy-in from community stakeholders, and I don't know that the 15 of us can carry all of that, is what I would just suggest. And hopefully looking at ways to bring in, like we have 2 members from a stakeholder group that are not completely aligned with what we're presenting. And I'm hoping that those 2 folks would be aligned at some point with what we're presenting, considering they're a part of this effort of trying to shape this report. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm trying to make sense. So yeah, so I'm hoping that we can build on what, in addition to what we're offering, in addition to what SB 125 task force members are offering, and really have broad-based support for how we fill this gap around funding. So great. Thank you for your time.
thank you.
Oh, please, Ms. Stewart, Member Stewart.
Thank you. I just wanted to.
Make sure your mic is on.
Oh.
There you are. Someone did it for you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to circle back to some thoughts from the public comment as well. When we are talking about changing to the what I'll call the vehicle miles tax, are we also making suggestions about how that funding be used? Right now the gas tax does get used to expand construction of roads. And, it struck me the comment that the needs assessment is not necessarily aligned with our climate goals. And it does offer an opportunity to put some input on how funding should be used and whether that funding should be used more to remediate the impacts of those vehicle miles traveled as well. So I did want to emphasize and put an exclamation on that thought, and ask you to consider putting that in the needs assessment, that, we're never going to have enough funding for all of the other stuff we want to do if we continue to use our funding for road expansion.
Thank you, Committee Member Stewart. I think what was not shown here was some of our first principles in sort of all the things that need to be accomplished in the state. The needs assessment report is largely the bulk of our roadway quote unquote improvements is maintenance and operations from the state. But
I think when that time comes, we will work with the legislature, and I think that will be the really critical point in time in addressing what would be, a sustainable transportation revenue source in that point in time.
You articulated that so much better than I did. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I in my head, I'm like, words.
And I'll honor the fact that you have a very difficult job. This report, I would not want to be the person responsible. So I really thank you, and I thank Laura, who I know you're working with, and everyone else who's helping to make this report possible.
Well, thank you so much for your time and feedback. And, you guys can always reach out to us, for any additional questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much. Seeing no further public comment. Yep, they didn't say there's more public comment. We're going to move to tab number 4, subcommittee updates. We are a bit late, so we're going to focus mostly on the action item, which comes from our Housing, Infrastructure, and Broadband Subcommittee, chaired by my cousin. We're going to just say that. Chair Cheryl Villegas Walker, who is the chair of the Housing, Infrastructure, and Broadband Committee. There is discussion and potential action for the report that she will provide. And following the report from Housing, Infrastructure, and Broadband, we will have brief reports from Safety and Climate, chaired by member Armis Kelly, and Walkability, Disability, and Complete Streets, chaired by member Rousey. Member Villegas Walker, Subcommittee Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair Walker. So our subcommittee met on November 19th, and the action item before you as agenda item number 4 is being put forward. It is a 2-page letter that was part of the agenda package. It was designated as attachment B. It's a letter addressed to the California Public Utilities Commission, urging the CPUC to work to establish an affordable connectivity program for California. Actually, I'd really like to acknowledge and thank Connie Stewart, who was the driving force behind this letter and is our resident expert. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the feedback provided by the other subcommittee members who were in attendance at our meeting. Amber Novi, Randy Torres Van Vleck, Christine Williams, and of course, the invaluable participation and input by William Walker. The letter is available for review and comment, and at this time, Chair Walker, I'd like to invite any of the committee members who have had the opportunity to review the draft letter to the CPUC to provide their input at this time.
Great. I can't see online hands, but I do see member or Vice Chair Armis Kelly who would like to speak. Oh, and is. Okay, great. So I will clear that hand. What I will say is I've taken a look at the letter personally, and I'm hoping that we can use the letter as an education opportunity for folks who aren't used to lobbying. And I know that we carbon copied other members of the California delegation. If we could just list them, because I don't think that most Californians know like what that is. And so that we can list exactly whom we're copying, the different members of Congress. And I'd also add, I'm curious if we should be copying if there's I'm not familiar with Senate and Assembly committees, but I imagine there's a committee that interacts with the PUC, because that committee, I would think, is what might be working with the Department of Technology, but I might be wrong. But I want to make sure that we're copying not just the folks that are responsible at the federal level, but folks within the state level, so that we can start this interagency discussion, an interdepartmental discussion. And I will hand it to Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I I would just start out by saying, we didn't know who the delegation was going to be when we wrote the letter. And actually some of the FCC commissioners have changed on the second letter as well. So I would ask the committee, to, or the committee, we're a committee, to allow us to make edits to the CC lists of both of these in order to do it. And part of the reason that I picked Senator Padilla is because we didn't know who our senator was going to be. So I would, of course, address it to both senators and ask the committee to change that as well. I would say that, yes, indeed, we should include the utility committees for the state on the CPUC letter. I also want to acknowledge that the committee asked me to write a third letter, and I went down a little rabbit hole on that letter. So why don't we wrap up these letters, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about the third letter that the committee asked that I didn't get into our packet.
There we go. I think that that sounds great. I think the changes that we're also making are very minuscule, so it's not going to hold up our approval of this letter as a committee. And whatever we don't approve, we'll hand off to the next members who will be here in, I believe, March. So I think the letter's great. I think that Subcommittee Chair Villegas Walker and Member Stewart are giving me way too many thanks, because I was very happy to engage with the subcommittee, but you all did the yo person's work, and y'all got your letter here on time, and I'm still working on mine. So I just want to echo the work it takes between meetings to get things done, and honor that you guys have been on top of it. And we'll be excited to, I'm excited to entertain a motion to approve this item's letter. And I think that might be, if we're done with the subcommittee report and there are no other comments, we could do that now, but there might be one more nope. Any comments? Okay. Member Gonzalez is moving to approve. Seconded by Member Armis Kelly. Is that okay, Chair Villegas Walker and Member Stewart?
I just want to make sure that the motion accurately reflects that there will be changes to the people and agencies who receive copies of the letter, but that the motion approves the letters as presented with the exception of the CC list.
All right, sounds good.
And mine won't go off, so.
Mine won't either, but so we might be having some technical difficulties with the mic, but did you want to say something, Member Armis Kelly? And you can use.
Real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to the subcommittee for the work that you put into this project. It really clearly is something that is needed. But even further, I think that even our own selves and our own jurisdictions, we have leverage, and I think that it'd be really a good idea to even move this item into our own legislation and body that we have at Access, like Ana Caballero and so many others that are in office. This is something that we can't dismiss. I've used this program, and in many occasions when things were really tight for me as a mother, I made a difference, because it was the difference between going and putting gas or getting a cell phone that you have to be able to access internet, work, whatever it may be, your children, and to have this affordability model, it should be there for us. So thank you for your work.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair. And I concur, I definitely use this program. My mom probably doesn't want me to tell y'all she used this program at her household too. And yeah, I mean, it was hard times when the world stopped and there was no income, but things still needed to happen. And hopefully we can continue to find alternatives to do that. We have a motion and a second. Is there public comment on the motion, or any comment from my fellow members online or in person on this motion?
Chair, we're not seeing anyone wishing to make comments on this item.
Thank you, Clerk Remedios. I'll hand it to Clerk Hall to call the roll for this action item just for this part of the tab to approve the signed letter.
Thank you, Chair. Chair William Walker,
Aye.
Vice Chair Armis Kelly,
Aye.
Alexandria Contreras, Ana Gonzalez,
Aye.
Herb Hastings,
Aye.
Gloria Huerta,
Aye.
Peggy Martinez, Amber Novi,
Aye.
Andres Ramirez, Michelle Rousey,
Aye.
Connie Stewart,
Aye.
Randy Torres Van Vleck,
Aye.
Cheryl Vegas Walker,
Yes.
Christine Williams. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. And I have a question for Ms. Erasmus, if possible. I'm curious, once the letter's signed, because the last time we did a signed letter, I signed it, went to Tokes. Tokes knows who we are. Tokes meaning our Secretary of Transportation for folks who aren't informed about that. I'm curious if there's a way that we could, once the letter is signed, we could maybe add a brochure of who the EAC is so that the folks who receive it know who we advise, who we are, our composition, and then maybe if there could just be a brief media release that goes out from the interagencies that can be shared on our website, and then I could possibly share that with EAC members to share with their local elected officials. Is that something that is appropriate? I'm putting you on the spot, I know, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair Walker. So what we're going to do is note all those requests, let us look at our ability to do that, and then we will let you know, and we will endeavor to do whatever we can.
Great, and I mean, I'm happy to do a draft and submit it so that some of the legwork is done for you.
I can add too that we do have a 2-pager with an info sheet that we'll be putting out later today. So that could be something
Sweet.
that generally goes out to people. So we'd be happy to share the PDF version so you can share it with your networks too.
Great, I think that Vice Chair Armis Kelly's suggestion was a great idea, and I think that it could be implemented, whenever we do a motion or do a letter or resolution, so on and so forth. Great. Member Stewart, and and then big thank you to you. This is you, right? This is you.
Member Novi helped me as well. I mean, in the whole committee. So I want to thank them. The committee had asked me to implement one more letter, and that was, and actually, Chair, you also were emphasizing this. That was regarding the state's equity plan and the broadband beat. Oh no, I lost my acronym here. But anyway, we'll just stick to the state's equity plan and our concern about the lack of matrix and really holding ourselves accountable to the outcomes that we are suggesting we need to do around broadband. So unfortunately, I went down a rabbit hole because I started looking at what the other 49 states had put in for metrics, and I am really sorry to report that the state really took a nosedive. And there are many plans that have much stronger, robust metrics, and our state, I actually went through the entire plan, and then I called some folks at NTIA and said, am I missing the metrics here? And they were like, no, there really weren't any in the state plan. I'm not through, of course, the review of all 49 plans. Most of them are 500 pages. However, Washington State is definitely a plan that I think is a model, and there may be more, but as far as Pacific Coast, I thought that we really should consider suggesting that the state relook at their metrics and their outcomes and evaluation of their plan. I do have to say, though, that the Trump administration nominee for Commerce has already pointed out the fact that he's a little concerned about the amount of energy that has gone into planning around providing broadband and the lack of actual implementation of deployment. And so I'm not sure that these equity plans will be worth the paper they're written on with the new future administration there. So I don't know how much effort to put into it early in the administration, but I'm happy to, before I leave my post, at least draft a letter for the next meeting for consideration.
Thank you, Carla.
Sounds good. I think that what I'll do is I'll ask if Subcommittee Chair Villegas Walker has anything to add, and if not, I can hand it off to the next presenter.
No, we're good. Thank you, Chair.
Great, and thank you for all that work. Shepherding things between meetings is very challenging. Chair of the Safety and Climate Subcommittee, that's my Vice Chair, Martha Armas Kelly. Your report, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I would like to say that we were recently tasked with submitting a mission and vision statement for the EAC. Our work, when we met in October, we're looking at ensuring safety measures for our California, including rumble strips and many other components that we felt that were lacking in our infrastructure, namely with the disabled and senior population. There is not enough information and access and mobility available for them. But in the gist of needing to provide an equity vision and mission statement, we adopted to take on that task. And later on today, during our tab 6, we'll be having a better, more robust discussion, and we'll discuss more about those strategies and goals for that specific item. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next.
Great, thank you. And for folks paying attention, that's tab 6 of our afternoon executive session, not tab 6 for this one, because there's no tab 6 for this. All right, thank you, Vice Chair Armas Kelly and Subcommittee Chair. Member Rousey, who is our chair of the Walkability, Disability, and Complete Street Subcommittee, it's your turn to provide your report.
This section, okay. Thank you, everybody. My name is Michelle Rousey. I'm chair of the Walkability, Disability, and Complete Street Subcommittee. We had our last meeting on November 18th, and myself, Anna Gonzalez, Amber Novi, Peggy Martinez, and William Walker were members of the committee that day. And we had a presenter, Francis De Sanchez, program manager of the Senate Bill 1121. She gave a.
I'm going to stop you again. I'm so sorry, Member Rousey. If you could adjust your computer as you did earlier, because it's not coming in clearly.
Is that better?
That's much better. And I think your speed is okay, but if you could say a sentence, please.
Okay, so I'm going to go into, we went into a brief summary and discussion of the meeting topic. Francis De Sanchez gave us an update on where we were with our feedback.
I'm sorry, this is the ASL interpreter. There's way too much interference for me to be able to pick this up.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I know earlier there was an angle that you had, and unfortunately it took your beautiful face off of the camera, but we were able to hear you a lot more clearly. Could you try to make an adjustment and then just say one sentence so I can get confirmation from our interpreter that she's able to make out what you're saying?
Let me take myself off camera and see if that will help.
Yeah, I was going to suggest if you take it off camera, it might also reduce some of the interference. I'm not sure. But go ahead, and now that you're off camera, angle that computer the best you can so that you're talking directly to the mic. Give me one sentence, please.
Okay, Francis De Sanchez gave us an update Is that better?
That's great.
Okay.
Continue, please.
So we had an update on the SB 1121 on where we were with our feedback as a committee. And the discussion was made based on the understanding that the committee feedback and recommendations were effectively captured through the member briefings conducted by CTC. Members agreed to provide final written comments to CTC no later than November 22nd in order for the feedback to be reflective in Francis's presentation for today, which we had already. Members can continue to provide feedback and comments through 12/11. And this is a final deadline to submit feedback to allow CTC staff adequate time to finalize the needs assessment based on the new submission deadline to the legislature. December 16th is the next meeting, and the December subcommittee meeting will offer a final opportunity for members to receive an update on the needs assessment and reflect on this process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm sorry about the interference, but we were able to hear you very clearly. Are there comments or questions for the subcommittee chair? Is there public comment on any of what we've discussed? And I probably should have taken public comment before our vote, but I bet my clerks would have told me if there was a hand up before that, and they didn't.
Thank you, Chair. There's no one expressing an interest on making public comment on this item.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Didn't mean to scare you. Thank you for, I did ask. All right, so we're early. That's always fantastic, but I'm going to take the opportunity to move from item 4 to item 5, which is our discussion of the strategic plan update. It's actually the strategic plan because I think it's the first strategic plan that the CTC has ever done for its own operations. And I'd like to introduce Eileen, I think it's Jacobowitz, with a hard J sound, yeah. Eileen Jacobowitz and Selena Polston. I promise to do that in the future before the meeting. They are members of the consultant team from the California State University, Sacramento. Go.
Hornets.
Hornets, there we go. My bestie went there, I should know. Sorry, Jimmy. And Eileen and Selena and their team from Cal State Sacramento contracted with the commission to assist us in the development of our first plan. They'll be providing an update on our strategic planning efforts undertaken the last few months, as well as our process moving forward. You're welcome to describe yourselves to the public, what you're wearing. We often have folks who are visually impaired that cannot see you, so go ahead and tell us what you look like.
Thank you, Chair Walker. Good morning. My name is Eileen Jacobowitz. I am a 5 feet tall white woman with shoulder-length brown hair, and I'm wearing a subtly striped pastel blazer. Selena, you want to?
Hello, I'm Selena Polston. I am a white woman, about 5'8.5", and I am wearing a black pantsuit.
I'm going to ask Rob to help me turn off my mic just so that my noise doesn't.
Thanks, everyone, for the opportunity to be here. So as Chair Walker described, we're here to talk a little bit about the strategic plan, the CTC strategic plan. I want to start by sharing our approach to the strategic planning process. Next slide, please. So with all the strategic plans we work with and all the 8 state agencies and organizations we work with, we start with an environmental scan. And we do that to get an understanding of the current landscape and opportunities and challenges on the horizon. So we did that and we gathered information from many folks, and you'll hear a little bit more about how we did that and what we heard. We took the information from the environmental scan, and that informed the development of the preliminary strategic plan. So we worked with the executive team, and they developed the first cut of the strategic plan, which we're going to walk through today. And that's where we are today. That's phase 3, where we'll gather feedback from you today. We'll gather feedback from the commissioners tomorrow, and then whatever public comment we receive in the process as well. Next week, we also will meet with CTC staff members to gather feedback from them on the preliminary strategic plan. And then next steps will be to integrate the feedback, publish a plan in early next year, and then the real work happens when the CTC staff actually implements the plan, and this is a 3-year plan. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Selena, and she's going to talk about the environmental scan.
Thank you, Eileen. Next slide, please. Great. Next slide. So and again, this is very sort of the beginning of our process. And for our environmental scan, it included 3 different input sources. The first one were 30 to 60-minute interviews that we conducted with almost all of the commissioners. We also did one-on-one interviews as well with each of the executive managers of the CTC. And finally, with some of the partners, being Caltrans and agency, as well as the 2 ex officios that are on the commission. We also conducted to date 2 focus group with CTC staff, and we had a total of 18 folks provide input through that method. And finally, we did also put out an anonymous survey where we asked for all thoughts and ideas regarding what the CTC should be focusing on in the next 3 years. And that was answered by the staff, and we heard from 16 staff. And as Eileen mentioned, I just wanted to say that this is an iterative process. And as we get through each step, we will be going back and asking for additional input and thoughts as we go along. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you there was a lot of data that was generated. If you can imagine all of the one-on-one interviews and the focus groups and the survey, but I wanted to sort of boil it down as much as we could about what we heard from the majority of folks. And they're in 6 themes, and I'm gonna go through each one of them. These were basically the themes that were in response to the question of, what do you see as the most pressing issues that the CTC is confronting right now, and what do you think they should be working on in the next 3 years? I mean, to boil it down, that's what we're looking at. So the first one, I'll just go by, I'll do the left column, and then I'll do the right column. Okay, so the first finding is that there is a very strong awareness amongst all of the stakeholders that there's a need to continue to both repair and extend the current infrastructure. And this is for various reasons, this will not surprise you: to increase safety, to connect and a currently very disconnected mass transit system, both within communities and between communities. Thirdly, and finally, that they really feel that there's a need to prepare current roads and bridges and other infrastructure for electrification of freight vehicles and so forth, as well as to prepare infrastructure to weather extreme events from climate change. And also, within all of this, there is a very strong awareness with every person that I spoke to that this is all happening, this is very costly, and it's ongoing, and it's happening at a time where obviously there's a need to replace the gas tax. So that's why I shared that one first. The second one, on the left-hand column, is focusing on, at the same time that there is a very strong need to invest in electrification. And this includes extending the charging station infrastructure, not only throughout the state, but across state lines, since not all travel is happening in California. And that there's a pressure, there's a tension that while electrification efforts continue to expand, it's also important that nobody is left behind, and that those who do not have access to electric vehicles or other mass transit are still able to travel to where they need to travel. And inside of this, there was concern, not from everybody, but from quite a few people, about addressing the consistent pushback against highway widening and repair. Not additional highways, but highway widening and repair. Okay, moving to the third finding. there was a belief among a lot of the respondents that the commission needs to expand its work and work more closely with some of its key partners. And this would be, for example, land use partners, employment partners, housing partners. And this is in order to ensure that transportation planning is really done at a high level, that it's organic, it's complete, and it's integrated. And so there was a sense that it is extremely important to coordinate efforts. Moving to the second column about equity, I just want to say right away that every respondent that I spoke to saw equity as a very, very important issue and an important goal of the commission. And what most people said was that they wanted to see more concrete outcomes around equity, that there was a lot of talk about equity, but what they wanted to see was actual outcomes that were resulting from the funding decisions made by CTC. There was a lot of focus on meeting, and we already talked about this today, ensuring that the needs of the both rural and border communities are addressed. And finally, that there is the need to bring in, be more proactive in bringing in non-traditional voices into the discussion and decision-making process. Okay, the fifth finding about opposing interests. A lot of people were very cognizant that the CTC must meet and balance the needs of labor, of business, of the environment, of community, of equity. And this is a very big job. There was some concern about, from some people, that right now that both labor and environmental advocates are exerting more power than some of the others, and that this was weakening the commission. It's important to note that all the respondents see all of these interests as valid. And there's also the belief amongst all of the respondents that there is no one-size-fits-all response. Finally, in terms of increasing influence and recognition, regarding influence, respondents want to see the CTC have more influence regarding policy direction and on stopping cost and scope creep for projects from their contractors. And regarding recognition, folks believe that the Commission's work is not sufficiently understood or appreciated. And part of this is there is a need for more and more effective communication strategy regarding the CTC's mission and its accomplishments. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So we took this information and we shared it with the executive team, the CTC executive team, and what you'll see is that what they developed as a strategic plan directly reflects what we heard in the environmental scan. So we held a few working sessions with the team, and I want to share with you what the team developed. So we'll start with the next slide, which is a refresh of the CTC mission to simplify it and to clarify it and to reflect what is the purpose of the mission of the CTC. So you'll see that the mission that they've developed is to invest in transportation that improves communities, the environment, and the economy. And you'll see on the next slide that this is the, you can go back to that slide, the next slide. Moving slowly. There we go. This was the mission statement that was adopted in 2010. You'll see that it's longer. They'll see the mission statement that was recently developed is, in my mind, cleaner and more direct, and more of a reflection of the work of the CTC. So what we're going to do is I'll go on and I'll talk about the goals and objectives to advance the mission, and then we'll ask for your comments and feedback. So next slide. Okay, so the executive team identified 6 goals to advance the mission, and the first goal is around prioritize safety, and the primary objective around prioritizing safety is investing in projects that reduce fatalities and injuries on the transportation system, ensure safe routes to school, and protect the California's transportation workforce. I would suspect that none of those are a surprise to you, and that safety was the top of the list there. Next goal. I mean, it's the next slide and next goal. Yeah. The next goal is around elevating community voices. And the first objective around that is invest in projects that reflect the needs and voices of the community. So that means include projects that include meaningful and robust community engagement, and projects that address vulnerable and marginalized community needs. Some of the challenges that you've raised even this morning, right? And the second objective around elevating community voices is to collaborate with y'all as a champion, a conduit of community voices. They saw that as really important to make sure that that was in the strategic plan. Third goal, next slide. The third goal is around ensuring a healthy environment for all. So the focus here is investing on projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, so advancing the state climate goals, improving air quality. We heard a lot about that today here in Riverside. Prioritizing multimodal options like active transportation, aligning transportation and land use specifically and including things like addressing housing needs, local housing needs, and protecting wildlife and natural resources. Goal 4, next slide. Goal 4 is moving people and goods efficiently, with the focus on investing in projects that support a vibrant economy, expand accessibility and mobility options, access to transportation, all modes of transportation, including for folks who are low-income folks and folks with disabilities, reducing congestion, and enhancing reliable freight throughput. Goal number 5, next slide. Goal number 5 is about partnering for success, and as we've heard, there are many partners in the transportation world, and the CTC executive team sees it's really important that there's a focus on partnering. So the first one, first objective associated with partnering for success is collaborating with partners to minimize cost increases and delays. So that includes with the folks who are delivering transportation projects, making sure that there's efficiency and effectiveness in how they deliver those projects. Engaging tribal governments for meaningful and timely input. Those are important voices in the transportation world and transportation investments. And communicating how transportation investments benefit the public. As Celine indicated, that we heard from a lot of folks that there's not a lot of awareness about the successes that the CTC has and the positive impacts that transportation projects have on communities and on the state, so that there's a desire to amplify some of those projects and some of those successes. And last but not least, goal number 6 is, next slide please, is an internal focus goal, because every good organization has some internal goals that they want to be improving internally. And the goal number 6 is support a team where people thrive. 3 objectives associated with the internal goal. To advance that internal goal is to continue to foster a culture where team members are respected and valued. Just a little side note here, when we spoke to CTC staff, there was great enthusiasm about the culture of the CTC internally. So it was really exciting to hear that people feeling good. Not that there aren't opportunities for improvement, but there are a lot of great things going on internally about how the organization operates. There is a desire to strengthen internal human resource functions, and last but not least, to create and communicate opportunities for growth and promotion for staff. So we will stop there and give you the opportunity to provide any feedback, ask us any questions. And lots of feedback, all right. All right. We didn't do that on purpose.
I know. I hope not. So what I'd like to do is I'll just start to my left. If you have any comments, Member Gonzalez, and just proceed to my right and then head to our online participants. Remember, if I get to everyone, we're going to be at about the end of the time for the item. So just try to keep your comments brief. And Member Gonzalez.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair Walker. So first of all, kudos. As an executive director myself, I know how hard it is to put a strategic plan together and get all the stakeholders and data together to just even get this started. So thank you for all your hard work and effort. I mean, great stuff. Thank you for, getting feedback from staff because, ultimately it is the hard work of the folks that do the work every day that the feedback matters the most, right? So you made a comment about, this factor in the world of transportation of the EJ communities and labor, right? Being at odds. And I experience that every day as an EJ champion, right? But I think there's an opportunity of bringing labor and EJ together. I think we're fighting for the same things. We're fighting for equity. We're fighting for good wages. We're fighting for health and just progress for our families, for, having a good sustainable wage, but also healthy, family. And so I think that there's an opportunity here where if we are to establish like some type of roundtable, right, within the CTC to bring folks together, and instead of having us work in silos, right, and have the CTC be that bridge for labor and EJ to bring us together and have that common ground, right, then we will achieve that I guess that common ground that we need to bring those solutions to the table instead of always fighting each other. So I think CTC has a great opportunity within the strategic plan development of creating this roundtable or task force or whatever we want to call it to bring all these groups together and really have this intentional conversation about how are we going to bring solutions in the transportation world and bring those two groups together, and including everybody else, right? Our folks with special abilities, our folks, our indigenous groups, right? Everybody to this same table and make sure everybody has a chair at this table, right? And I think there's a great opportunity within the strategic plan to make that happen, because I think that we can't afford to be working in silos anymore. And there's this perception that corporations take advantage of by giving us crumbs that, it kind of forces us to fight each other, right? And so the CTC should be the champion and the leader to bring us to the table together and find those solutions to find common ground. I love the goals that we should be fighting for climate change solutions and reductions of greenhouse emissions and, carbon, NOx, ozone, everything. But we can only do that if we can really take a look at reducing those freeway expansions and road expansions. And like Mr. McCarthy mentioned in his comment, our population is decreasing. So how do we find solutions to make more walkable communities, reducing our VMTs and all of that? So let's be more strategic about that. And when we do have agencies like RCTC and SBCTA and other regional agencies, let's have that intentional community involvement, so we can really talk about how do we make our communities more walkable and bring those public transportation opportunities to the table. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Member Gonzalez. And if I coax you guys, I'm the bad person, and I'm sorry. I don't mean to be a bad person. Member Stewart. You're on.
I'm on.
Okay.
I was just going to suggest, Chair, that maybe we all have 30-minute interview with you or something, because I'm sure we have a lot to say and we only have 10 minutes to say it in.
I was
wanted-
going to suggest that too.
Yeah, I would love to be interviewed for this. Because I have some detailed questions for you. First of all, and I'm not going to let you take my time, but before you wrap up, I want to know more what you meant about scope creep. And in your and so if you would say something in your closing around CTC scope creep, just so I'm understanding exactly what the concern was. In goal 1, I have to also say, reduce injuries around in rural communities. We have divided roads. We have so many problems with people getting hit crossing the highway in the city of Eureka. Because the highway dissects the communities. So I really appreciate that you called out safe routes to school, but everyone needs a safe route through highways. I have more. For your goal around healthy environments, I appreciate all the greenhouse gas and air quality, but with climate change, there's a lot more threats. We're experiencing so many landslides and flooding incidents on highways. So I hope that goal could get expanded to really healthy environments for all. And then, it always seems like when we put those goals in and then we go straight back to the core goals of goods movements and the vibrant economy. And so I just wanted to make sure that goal 4 doesn't trump all of the other goals in that issue, to the conversations we had this morning around, we understand the needs for goods and services, but if they continue to impact the empire, inland empire the way they have, then they really just throw all the other goals out of alignment. So I think, pointing to the CTC's role in finessing that, I mean, because that's the tightrope that they all walk every meeting. And then I'm really glad you pointed out the Partners for Success in the tribal governments. But there's, I think we can even expand on collaborating. And I think we always point out that the EAC does not represent everyone. And so, we're really appreciative that folks come to us, but it's not enough outreach just to come to us. So figuring out how to engage environmental communities, especially the EJ communities, beyond the EAC is really critical too. So I want to thank you for your work. I think it's fantastic. I think also goals around communication. I've been on this task force since I started on the task force. I feel like I'm just now understanding the infrastructure around here. I think there's really a need to articulate more the infrastructure and we've seen so many people come to the wrong place to get help. So I would appreciate, I think there needs to be a more inward or outward marketing campaign exactly about the role of all 3 of our transportation partners and what they do and how they operate and how to interact and engage with them. So I overdid my time. I still want 30 more minutes. I'm gonna pass it down here.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. Am I on? I don't think
You're on.
okay.
You're on.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank you, and I want to echo pretty much everything that's been said, so I don't take too much more time. But well, I will take time. But I wanted to say something about climate. When you were in that first module, you were talking about climate change considerations. I think that we're really passive in the areas of actually mobilizing climate funding. I've been at these sessions for the last 2 years, and when we talk about regular repairs, which are, they're needed, right? But we have to take a special funding, pocket, bucket just for climate repairs. I know I think about an infrastructure that is, just down south over here where there's water, ocean, and erosion, and all these different things, and no one could actually mitigate or even foresee how much those costs are going to impact our budget. So allotting funding specifically for climate related repairs and considerations, because you have to have, like, if you have an erosion, there's flora, that you have to think about. You got to bring in arborists, special technical support for said projects, engineers that are specifically geared towards climate impacts. That's costly. And it's not your average day-to-day funding that's going to meet that need. So we need to be intentional about when we say we're going to do this for climate. As a climate environmental justice advocate, I think that we need to use the language specific to those needs that we're speaking to. We can't just say climate and put a blanket over it. We need to talk about what we're saying. Are we talking about air quality? Are we talking about, land, acquisition? What is it that we're talking about? What's it going to cost? And be more transparent with the community. One of the biggest proponents for people having complaints is because they don't see the layers. And it wasn't until I actually became part of the EAC that I started understanding the complexity of the layers that it takes to do a job. Like, you want a stop sign, and you say to your local group, and you say, we want a stop sign. Okay, well, let's get the stop sign. 3 years later, that stop sign still hasn't been, brought in, and the people are angry, and they blame you for it, but they don't understand that it goes through funding cycles, people that are actually equipped to apply for those grants, technical support if you're a smaller jurisdiction, the different types of projects. That is information. We need to give more education to the community, more education to the media in how to approach us. And really, like you said, celebrate our victories. There are a lot of things that we do that are right, that we need to inform people. Recently, I said, catch me at my best with CalSTA. I was saying that there are people out there that have a correlation with law enforcement in a negative connotation when our folks are out there saving lives, doing things that are almost impossible in some of the areas that are most impacted for structural deficit. Bishop, we were out there. Like, if you were in a crisis, how do you get to the people, And so there's so many layers. And when our member was talking about having a task force, I think that the EAC is that task force, but we're not putting enough emphasis or looking at the jewel that we have in the rough to be a potential hub for that information. And those meetings need to be more organic, in the sense that we meet, if we can't meet with one-on-one, then we can meet with y'all to be able to create informative recaps, so that departments within the departments of all these organizations get briefed, or they connect with us, so that we can be able to give information. But again, it goes back to that. I can go on and on and on, because I've done this before, and I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the interagency for even bringing you in, because it takes a humble heart to look inwardly and say, we're not doing things the way we want to be doing them, and we want to reflect on that. So I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Do I have members on the dais, the virtual dais, that would like to speak at all before I call on myself? And if you are a member of the public, either in the room or at our virtual dais, in the virtual room there, you're welcome to raise your hand in the room virtually, or bring up a public comment card if you'd like to speak in person, because we will be closing out this item soon along with the meeting, so that we can take a quick recess, so that we can come right back and do it all again at 1 o'clock. I'd like to say thank you for including us in your process, and I appreciate that we're being given this valuable time to comment. I think that the mission statement should probably have safety in it. It's nice that it's a lot shorter and more digestible, but if it adds safety, you then have the core four that the other two agencies refer to. So I think that that would be helpful. Often we say finding ways to look at how we thread equity through everything that we do, and folks who are in the safety and climate space would probably say the same. So when you look at each of the goals, thinking about if there's something that refers to equity and to climate resilience in each of the goals. I think that your goal about community voice, looking at ways to have that defined by the community itself. It's why we're sitting here, because the agencies realize that they probably wouldn't be able to define equity without inviting folks from communities that reflect the equity that we're seeking. I'll echo the comment earlier made by several of my colleagues that to say that you're moving people and goods efficiently often comes in conflict with safety. And so to make sure that if we're moving, freight efficiently, it comes into, goods would be the freight piece of that. So looking at how to make sure that if we're going to move freight efficiently, there should be a plan to address walkability. There should be a plan to address issues around safety in regard to environmental safety with pollution and climate, as well as with walking across highways. As Member Stewart mentioned, Highway 101 goes through her community, goes through my community as well, as a local street. Highway 101, one of the busiest highways in America. And then looking at how it was mentioned that we want transportation investments to be communicated, how we benefit the public, but we also need to communicate how reducing trips helps the public, reducing emissions, right? And having our investments be one piece of it, so we can say, hey, look at this high-speed rail train that we've built. We also need to say, hey, look at how we're no longer, creating 1 million trips because we've encouraged members of the community to take more sustainable modes. And when you talk about the team at the CTC, I think that often we've had this question at this dais: are we a part of that team? Are we a part of those interviews, as was mentioned? And if not, why? And if so, how do you ensure, because if you have a strategic plan that doesn't center this group, then, every meeting I've been to for the CTC has talked about equity. Like because I've been to, like, Martha and I, between the two of us, we've covered every single commission meeting in the last 2 years, and there isn't one that equity wasn't discussed. And it wasn't just because we were in the room, because often we were just on the Zoom. And so looking at how to ensure that. I'll end on scope creep, because I know that Member Stewart wanted you to address that. When you look at the Senate Bill 1, it's a roads act. This act is about roads. The CTC was formed to help distribute those funds, among other reasons. The CTC predates Senate Bill 1, but it probably doesn't predate an excise tax on gasoline and whatever that bill that created it the first time and the 17th time. And so the current iteration we're working on, when you talk about the mission of the CTC, when stakeholders come here that are not us, they remind us that this is a roads act. And so if you're not addressing that, and when you discuss the strategic plan, you will continue to have the conflict of where someone says it's a repair, a shop project, even though it's an auxiliary lane, and that auxiliary lane creates more trips because it's widening a highway. I'll stop there.
I just wanted one last comment.
One last comment.
One last comment.
Vice Chair.
So whatever you say with creep, the scope, scope creep.
I want to also include that we also need to have backup plans when we get those RFPs from folks that are bidding on jobs. We need inclusions for climate, possibilities or variances in a project so that we don't have that creep, happen. And then we also need to ensure that there's safety measures included in the RFPs when they ask and they bid. Those bids should include mitigation outcomes in case something should go wrong. And there should be an out. If something were to happen, we just can't keep doing the project just because the project's been paid for. We need to have something as a backup remediation, some type of change that will allow for folks to have and ensure safety in the community. And I refer back to the San Joaquin 99 Corridor project. We're moving on, but we have to recognize that we can't just always move on without having some type of remediation in effect. And the onus of responsibility starts with us. And yes, the contractees eventually get the project, but we need to make sure that they are doing their due diligence for the safety of our California.
Thank you. Very quickly, just to clarify what is meant by scope creep, it was not referring to projects being outside of road maintenance or road expansion. It was more of a narrow interpretation of contracts projects taking longer to implement or costing more to implement. So I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, Member Rousey has her hand up.
Member Rousey.
Yeah, I took off videos so maybe you can hear me better. I really appreciate what members have said already about this, and I'm wondering if at all that we could, as a committee, could be more included in the processes of this, and just so that we feel like we're involved at the different levels of this. Thank you.
Great. So I'm hoping that because you'll come back to this body in a different composition, I think it would be a lost opportunity if you weren't to consult folks who are currently here now, regardless of how you move forward with the new composition of our committee. So hopefully you'll consider doing some interviews with us. And I know that that's a cost. That is the scope creep that you're speaking of. Because as I was thinking of that, I was like, I'm going to suggest something and it's going to cost more money. And so I want to make sure that if it doesn't happen during this round, because there may not be more money to spend on it, that it's something that you capture in your analysis. Because I think that being able to interview not just us as stakeholders, but the commission meetings start with 15 reports from stakeholders. So to say that the commission is just the staff, the appointed commissioners, and to not consider, at least one representative from those 15, that's at least 15 more interviews. You may not have the capacity to do 15 EAC members, but maybe the EAC needs to then convene something themselves to have a more in-depth discussion about the strategic plan so that whomever the chair is in the future can reflect that as well. I want to also reflect that Commissioner Tiffany has joined us. So I think that 3 commissioners are now here: Vice Chair Grisby, Chair Eager, Commissioner Tiffany. And if I've missed anyone, please forgive me. How does that all sound?
We will take it under advisement.
Sounds good.
Appreciate your input and your feedback.
Great. Member Stewart, last words? Yeah, oh, that's a morbid statement, but last comment.
Yes, last comment on this issue. I want to be clear, and I want to emphasize what we're trying to say to you. And I've talked about my, chart that I keep wanting to do around whether you're actually included or consulted, or whether we're just considered a checked box afterwards. And so what we're all trying to say to you is, if the CTC Commission really wants equity included, then after you've already created the goals, you've already done all the interviews, coming to us and saying, well, here, we've given you a presentation, is not meeting what the intent of including equity is. And so the fact that we weren't included during the interview phase or prior to the goals being created, so it's just here we have 15 minutes, tell us what you think. And our chair is going, stop talking, Stuart, stop talking.
No, I'm not actually.
Well, I know, no.
Go on.
But it's really frustrating to us, and it actually creates acrimony with us. So it's almost better that you didn't come than if, because it's like, hey, you have 15 minutes to tell us what you think. We can check a box and say, we asked the commission. So that is, I'm going to be blunt. That's what we're all feeling by having this item brought to us already in this condition. And that's why we're saying to you, we'd like you to come back and actually speak to us so we can actually have time to reflect or even see the survey instrument. I know this is not on you, but or see the survey instruments or be more part of the process.
And I will just say before I turn it over to Director Taylor, that they say the sign of a good chair is when a chair doesn't have to speak. I've done my job. Director Taylor, Executive Director of the Commission.
That is true. Good leadership lets the team and the good people around us lead. And I hear what our committee is saying. I respect what you're saying, and we will commit to coming back to you before your term is up to do either a focus group or those interviews to incorporate into the strategic plan. So thank you for that feedback.
Thank you.
And thank you. With that, now I'm saying stop speaking because that's the feedback that I'm trying to incorporate, and Member Stewart knows it because I've been really generous with just letting people go over our time limits. We're now 10 minutes over time for the meeting. Is there public comment for this item?
Chair, we're not seeing any requests for public comment on this item.
Any further comments from the dais or on the virtual dais? With that, what I will do, I'm making sure I'm covering everything. Yes, so thank you to Ms. Jacobowitz and Ms. Polston, and we look forward to talking with you more. And I'm assuming there's no public comment also for the entire meeting because I missed that at the very beginning. So at this point, we will adjourn our business session and recess until we return for our executive joint session with our commissioners, 3 of whom are in the room, and we'll probably have 1 or 2 more. And want to thank you all. Enjoy your break. And thank you for coming if you're not returning to the afternoon session. And this meeting's adjourned at 12 noon.